Back live with you tonight on In Focus. Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Public Enterprises has grilled Eskom executives, the state-owned entity's performance on the power front and its recent record financial loss were some of the issues discussed. Portfolio chairperson Khayalethu Magaxa joins us now for more. Chairperson, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. A number of areas were traversed today. We'll come to the Generation Recovery Plan, but first and foremost, I think what is key to many is the leadership stability at Eskom. The CEO question, was this question adequately answered for you in terms of, one, the pace at which the board, along with the minister, have been working to secure this individual that is required there, the criteria that they have set in terms of the individual that is required there? Are you comfortable that they would have found the right candidate in the three that they say would have been given to the minister?
Well, in terms of our oversight role, we don't get too much in terms of details of how one is appointed. But at least in terms of the process, we are comfortable with the explanation we got from the chairperson of the board, which we also appreciated the stability used to start there at the cabinet level. We believe that the current board is ready to face the challenges. It's a competent one, and it has all the necessary requisites. Therefore, we appreciate the process they have taken, including identifying three possible candidates with the correct and acceptable qualifications, and now the ball is in the hands of the cabinet, where the determination is going to be made as to who exactly is going to be our group CE of Eskom.
Yeah. One would say, how can lawmakers be comfortable with a situation where such a crucial entity in terms of economic growth in the country, we know what has happened to the economic growth because of the energy crisis, can sit without leadership, at least stable leadership, not acting leadership, for over 9 months?
Well, while I'm not going to speak on their behalf on that, but one could also understand that the manner in which the previous group CE left, it was very sporadic, and there was no proper preparation for his leaving. Therefore, Eskom has to try to avoid the continuous mistake, to commit the same mistake that they did when they appointed the previous one. Therefore, they need to look at the candidates properly and select the suitable people. They have explained to us how that process was efficiently and coherently done in a collective manner by the leadership. Therefore, we think when we look at that, when we deal with Eskom with those kind of problems, it's possible that you can take some time in order to come up with a credible process. Therefore, I think we do understand a bit as to why there was that delay.
Are you comfortable with how they've captured what the business requires? One, they say they need an individual, at least technically, with a better understanding, unlike the previous group CEO who left, who was mostly of a legal background. They're saying you need somebody with engineering capacity to be able to understand what is happening, but also somebody who understands governance at a higher level to be somebody that would be suitable for that position.
Of course, the members of parliament raised that point sharply as to whether there is no repeat of that mistake, because one of the criticism that were always raised about the previous Group CE was around that particular background, that you cannot have in a hospital a person who has a background, for example, of teaching without having any knowledge, either pharmacy or nursing or doctor totally with no concrete knowledge of that particular important area. Therefore, even in this instance, members questioned that process, whether is the board chair and his team are comfortable with that particular issue, that we're not going to find ourselves in the same situation again. And they assured us that in terms of what they understand as the essential or the necessary requirement that is needed, they are comfortable with the three candidates they have selected.
Let's then move on to the next question raised by the members of the committee. What are your concerns around the relationship that the board or maybe even management at Eskom has with the Minister of Electricity?
Well, we didn't ask that specific question as such, but having an opportunity, because the previous week we were briefed by the Minister of Electricity in the Presidency. He came not only to brief us as a portfolio committee, but went to the extent of putting a statement and addressing the entire Parliament in terms of what he is doing and how he is doing his work. And everybody who's a member of Parliament who was present there appreciated the role he is playing. Also, when we received the report today from Eskom, it was clear that in terms of the content of the report, that some of the issues that were raised by the minister in terms of the planning and the entire commitments that are made, including the one that we mentioned when we were starting the interview about the 60% energy availability by March and next year and all that. Those were the areas that were articulated properly by the minister, meaning that the minister and the board of Eskom are on the same wavelength in terms of understanding the plans of the government to resolve this quagmire of electricity crisis.
Yeah. Why would that be important that the Minister of Electricity and the board are on the same wavelength? Because from what we are seeing, it's probably an interministerial effort where you have the Mineral Resources Department, you've got the Department of Public Enterprises, and now the added Department of Electricity that are seemingly not always, from what we see, on the same wavelength.
Well, here I'm talking about the relationship, not among ministers. I'm talking about the relationship between Eskom and the Minister of Electricity. I don't know the relationship between ministers, but I never heard anything that questioned their relationship as ministers. But in terms of Eskom and the Minister of Electricity, I'm 100% sure that in terms of their work to improve the situation that we are experiencing currently at Eskom, they are in the same wavelength. Remember, that is the same minister when he took over immediately. He went to the extent of going, not only meeting the executive of Eskom, but went to the extent of going to each and every power station, identifying problems, interacting with people in charge of those institutions, including tackling problems with them at that level. Therefore, the possibility of being in the same wavelength with the minister, with the executive of Eskom is highly possible. That's why we're not surprised when we listen to Eskom articulating in terms of what is in their program, what they have been doing, and what is their way forward, including what the minister said. It's in the same level, and it proves that there are no tensions, there are no problems currently among the two.
It could be maybe a minor issue. For example, one of the issues I raised with the Minister of Electricity when he was here was the very same question of the delays in appointing a CEO. But where he was sitting, he says, I would have loved to have the CEO in place by now, but it's not my decision to make, because that decision lies with the Department of Public Enterprises. So you see where there might not be flowing maybe at the same kind of pace in terms of their thinking?
Well, we ourselves were also on the same problem. We were also disappointed when we realized that there are still questions in terms of the process. When the minister rejected one name, we felt that the process is a bit delayed. Therefore, even if you would have asked me at that time, I was also going to express my discomfort about that process. Therefore, I think it's a normal response that anyone who is anxious to resolve the problem at Eskom would have said.
Yeah. Let's look at those numbers then. 24 billion rands in losses. They're saying huge issue amongst the issues that would have been the driving force is the use of open cycle gas turbines, saying that use of OCGs to augment, of course, generation capacity that should have been coming from a reliable coal fleet is certainly at the heart of why we are seeing those losses. What do you think as the committee is doable here in terms of reducing our reliance on open cycle gas turbines?
Well, as a legislative arm of the state, we only had an obligation to just advise. We make some advices there, like we appreciate that there is a challenge of non-payment by customers such as residents, including government entities and big corporates. They all contribute to these problems of Eskom, these financial problems of Eskom, and including Izinyoka that are all over the country. Even where I stay, I pass a huge squatter area that is having an electricity that is illegal, Therefore, those are the problems that contribute massively on these losses at Eskom. Also, the diesel is highly expensive, and unfortunately, Eskom is using 2 billion a month on diesel only. That is a situation that we are having, the reality of the situation that we are having. Now, the only challenge, the only way we can suggest to deal with the problem is that Eskom must develop a program of tackling those areas and be more strict on the big corporate because they can afford. We cannot treat big corporates on the same way we deal with poor residents. For example, I'm referring to my neighbors and others everywhere in Soweto, in KZN and everywhere, where there's a lot of Izinyoka due to the people who are just putting structures everywhere and want to have electricity. Therefore, you cannot treat those people in the same way you treat the big companies that are refusing to pay Eskom huge amount. Therefore, there is a program they talk about, they were referring to, I don't know, it's Yaklima Manj. Now, those kind of programs perhaps could force the corporate. If a corporate fails to pay, and if those, including some government entities that are not paying, Eskom, if negotiations are not helping, they can apply some very harsh mechanism in order to force them. By doing that, you are forcing society to have a culture of paying. And the first people supposed to pay in terms of building a culture of paying are those who can afford to pay first, before you go to those who are not having means to pay.
Yeah. Let's talk then, finally, the generation recovery plan. Are you comfortable, one, with the plan that it is doable? I mean, the targets being set. For example, we kept being told that things are going to get better in 24 months. That was now at least 36 months ago. So we kept saying, no, 24 months, things are going to get better. Now we are being told in the next 4 to 5 months, we are going to be seeing an energy availability factor of 65%. Is that just a thumb suck, or are you convinced that there are clear steps and milestones that will be achievable in the next 4 months to get us to that number?
Unlike the previous leadership that was there, if one look at it, at some point, I think it was in 2020, where Eskom convinced us that in 3 years' time, they will fight load shedding, and we won't have load shedding by that time. And they will defeat load shedding in 3 years' time. But as we go on, we realize that there are no convincing mechanism in place that are really evidence that A, B, C is going to happen. But in this leadership that was making presentation to us this year, it take you to, for example, to the nuclear plant in Quebec. They will say that a unit there that has been giving problems since 2020, they concentrated to it and they resolved its problem. Now it's fully operational. And they will tell you what they are doing. Now you will see how many units that are operational and how are they going to be dealing with another one in another power station to resolve those. At least there are concrete plans here. You could see that they are dealing here. There is a unit that is fully operational and with so much megawatts and so on. Therefore, when you have a plan of that nature, you become very comfortable, at least, because you could see that there is work that is done.
What gives you that confidence? I mean, the team that's there, capacity to execute. One thing that certainly the chairperson said, that this is not a one-man job. It will not rely on the Group CE, but it's the people at Eskom that are going to turn this around. Do we have the right people to execute?
I think we have got the right people. The fact that the head of generation is the person who has been leading for a long time certain power stations. He has been operating some power stations. It's not somebody taken from somewhere else. It's a person who has a know-how, got an experience, and you can hear from his mouth when he's articulating that this guy knows what he's doing. He knows what is happening. He can take you to some of the mistakes they committed in the past and how now they're going to avoid that to happen again. Therefore, to me, I think, because I'm a layman, I'm not an engineer, but at least somebody can explain in a more scientific way how he thinks this problem is going to be resolved. At least now, members of parliament who are not easy to convince, but today they were much more comfortable with the explanations that were given.
Chairperson, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on. Portfolio Committee Chairperson for the Committee on Public Enterprises, Khayalethu Magaxa.